Marin Cole had appraised 3 estates that week alone, and this one was already the worst of them. She stood at the edge of a gravel lot on the far side of Delwood, Ohio, holding a clipboard she hadn't needed to open yet, looking at a garage that appeared to have been losing a slow argument with time for about 30 years. The roll-up door was dented on one side. The gutters hung at an angle that suggested they had simply given up. A hand-lettered sign above the door read Pruitt Repair, Automotive and General, and below it, in smaller letters, someone had added by appointment preferred, which Marin suspected was the funniest thing she had read all month. Her client was a regional holding company that had acquired the property in a debt settlement and wanted it cleared, assessed, and listed by the end of the quarter. She had 40 minutes. The man who came out to meet her wiped his hands on a shop rag before he offered one to shake. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, dark-haired, with the kind of unhurried steadiness that either meant he had nowhere to be or that he had simply decided, a long time ago, that hurrying changed nothing. He smiled like he meant it. "Cal Pruitt," he said. "Thanks for coming out." Marin shook his hand, introduced herself, and looked past him at the garage interior. Oil-stained concrete. 2 older vehicles in various states of disassembly along the left wall. A parts shelf that ran the full length of the back. A work table near the window where a girl, 9 or 10, dark-haired like her father, feet not quite reaching the floor, sat reading a paperback with the focused quiet of someone who had learned to be comfortable in a working space. And in the center of the garage, occupying the best square footage, sitting under a canvas tarp so old the grommets had gone green with age, something large. Marin made a note on her clipboard. Unidentified covered vehicle, assess. The holding company's position, she said, keeping her voice professional and even, is a cash buyout of the contents. Tools, equipment, vehicles, inventory. We'd want everything out within 60 days of closing. Cal nodded like she had said the weather was mild. "I figured," he said. "You want to walk through?" She did. He walked her through without commentary, answering her questions when she had them, not filling the silence when she didn't. The tools were good, better than good, actually, she noted that without writing it down yet. The parts inventory was methodically organized, labeled in a hand that was small and precise. 2 of the vehicles along the wall were restorations in progress, both older American iron, both looking like someone who knew what he was doing had gotten about halfway there and then run out of time. She stopped in front of the canvas tarp. "What's under here?" "Project," Cal said. He said it simply, the way a man says something that belongs entirely to him. "How long has it been a project?" He thought about it. 12 years, give or take. Marin made a note. Long-term unfinished build, condition unknown. She looked at the tarp, at the shape of what lay underneath, low-slung, longer than it appeared at first glance, and then looked back at her clipboard. "Hobby metal," she wrote. "Sentimental value likely exceeds market. I can offer $4,000 for the contents," she said. "Tools and equipment are solid, but the vehicles are mid-restoration, and an unfinished build of unknown origin doesn't move at auction without documentation." From the work table, without looking up from her book, the girl said, "That's not right." Marin looked over. The girl had set the paperback face down on the table. She was watching Marin now with the patient, direct expression of a child who has decided that politeness does not require silence. "Willa," Cal said, not as a warning, more as an acknowledgement that she had entered the conversation and was now part of it. "4,000 isn't right," Willa said. She slid off the stool and walked across the floor to stand beside her father, looking up at Marin with the same steadiness. "Dad's been building that car for my whole life and before that. He knows what it is." "Willa," Cal said again, and this time there was a gentleness in it that made Marin go still for a half-second. "She should know," Willa said. Not unkindly. Just plain. Marin looked at Cal. He was looking at his daughter with an expression she couldn't fully read, something between proud and pained and something else that didn't have a clean name. Then he looked at Marin. "You want me to pull the tarp?" he said. She said yes, mostly out of professional obligation. She was not prepared for what came next. He pulled the tarp back in one motion, the old canvas collapsing softly onto the floor behind the car, and Marin Cole stood very still and looked. It was a racing body, a coupe, low and spare and purposeful, with the kind of weight distribution you could read in the stance before you ever put it on a scale. The panel work was hand-formed. She could see that immediately, the way the surfaces flowed without the slight uniformity of a stamped part. The paint had not been applied yet, the metal was an epoxy primer, smooth and gray-green under the shop lights, but the proportions were unmistakable. This was not a kit build. This was not a modified production car. Someone had fabricated this from intent. The roll cage inside was TIG welded. Clean as anything Marin had seen outside a professional shop. She walked around the front slowly. The engine bay was occupied by a small displacement inline-six that she didn't immediately recognize, fitted with individual throttle bodies and a dry sump system. Someone had made the intake manifold by hand. "What is this?" she said. "It's a GT Recreation," Cal said carefully. "Based on a factory racing program that ran for about 8 months in 1963 before the company pulled the plug. They built 3 cars. 2 were destroyed in period racing. The third one," he paused. "They always said it was destroyed too." Marin looked at him. "Was it?" "No," Willa said, from beside the rear quarter panel. She was running one finger along the edge of the wheel arch with the ease of a child who had grown up touching this car. "Show her the plate, Dad." Cal crouched at the front of the car, near the firewall, and reached beneath the insulation that lined the inner fender. He worked by feel. He had done this before, many times, found the same spot without needing to look, and when his hand came back out, it held a small stamp plate, roughly the size of a playing card, with a series of numbers and a factory code embossed into the metal. He held it out to Marin. She took it. She looked at it for a long time. She knew enough about provenance work to know what a factory build plate meant. She knew enough about this particular mark. She had handled 2 of their production series vehicles in estate sales over the past 4 years, to recognize the code prefix. And she knew, standing in an oil-stained garage on the outskirts of Delwood, Ohio, that the prefix on the plate in her hand did not match any production series. It matched a race program sequence. "Where did you find this car?" she said. "Barn in West Virginia," Cal said. "Estate sale, 2013. It was in pieces. Not even identified as what it was, listed as a partial custom build, unknown origin, sold as is." He looked at the plate in her hand. "I didn't know what it was either, not for the first 2 years. I just knew the fabrication was too good. Spent 6 months cross-referencing factory records before I found someone at the Marks Heritage Division who'd talk to me." "And what did they say?" "They said the plate sequence matched a car that had been signed off for destruction in November of 1963 and had never actually been destroyed. Somewhere in the paperwork chain, the car got separated from the record." He reached out and took the plate back from her, gently. "I've spent 12 years putting it back together the right way." Marin stood in the center of the garage and did the math she was already doing, even though part of her mind was still catching up. A verified factory-coded survivor from a 3-car racing program, 2 of which were confirmed destroyed. Authenticated provenance through the Marks' own Heritage Division. 12 years of correct, documented restoration by a builder whose roll cage welds she would put against any professional shop in the state. $4,000, she had said. She looked at Willa, who was watching her with the expression of a child who already knew the answer and was waiting to see if the adult would arrive at it honestly. "I owe you an apology," Marin said. Willa shook her head. "You just didn't know yet." That was the moment, not the build plate, not the inline-six, not the hand-formed panel work, that Marin Cole understood she had badly misjudged this garage and everything in it. She left without making another offer. She went back to her office and made 4 phone calls. Then she called a colleague who specialized in authenticated motorsport provenance, described what she had seen, and listened to a long silence on the other end of the line. "Show me the plate numbers," her colleague said. She did. The silence got longer. "Marin," he said, finally. "You are looking at the only surviving example of a factory racing car from a program that the Mark has been trying to locate for 60 years. She already knew that. She had known it since she was standing in the garage looking at a 9-year-old girl's expression of patient certainty. The next 6 weeks were paperwork and authentication and a private sale process that moved faster than any she had managed in 11 years of doing this work. The Marks Heritage Division sent a representative who brought a conservator, who spent 2 days with the car and then made a phone call that resulted in several people on the other end talking at once. The sale closed on a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks to the day after Marin had stood in that gravel lot with her clipboard and her 40-minute timeline. The figure was $2,100,000. The buyer was the Mark's own foundation, which had a mandate to acquire authenticated surviving examples of the company's racing history and had been looking for this specific car for longer than Cal Pruitt had been alive. She drove out to Delwood that same afternoon with the closing paperwork and a cashier's check that she had never in her career been responsible for delivering in person. She told herself it was because the situation called for it. The gravel lot looked the same. The sign still hung at the same angle. The roll-up door was up, and she could hear something, a radio, low, and the sound of metal on metal, the patient rhythmic sound of someone working. She walked in. Cal was at the workbench, bent over something she couldn't identify yet. Willa was on the stool beside him, not reading this time. She had a small flashlight in one hand and was holding it steady on the piece her father was examining, the way someone holds a light when they know exactly what's needed without being asked. They both looked up when Marin came in. "Hey," Cal said. No surprise in it. As if he had expected her, or as if the presence of people in his garage was simply a fact of life that didn't require much reaction. Marin held out the envelope. "Sale closed this morning," she said. "I wanted to bring this myself." He took the envelope, looked at it for a moment, and set it on the corner of the workbench without opening it. Willa looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Marin. "Did it sell for what it was worth?" she said. "It sold for $2.1 million, Marin said. Willa nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already understood. "Dad said it would be close to that," she said. "He never told me to stop believing it." Cal finally looked at the envelope again, then picked it up, opened it, and read the closing number in the silence of the garage. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he set the check down carefully and picked up the tool he had been working with before she arrived, and went back to the piece on the workbench, and Willa moved the flashlight to follow his work without being asked. Marin stood in the doorway and watched them. She had been doing this job for 11 years. She had walked through 400 garages, attics, barns, and estate lots. She had learned, over that time, to read a room for what it held. She had not, until 6 weeks ago, understood that the most valuable thing in a room was not always the thing with a price tag. "What's the new project?" she said. Cal glanced up. 1968 coupe. Not a prototype this time. Just a car that needs someone to pay attention to it. "How long will it take?" He looked at Willa, who looked back at him. "However long it takes," Willa said. Marin laughed, and it surprised her, the sound of it in the garage, how comfortable it felt. She didn't leave for another hour. They showed her the new project, the 3 things that needed to happen before it could move, the logic of the work. Cal explained without lecturing. Willa translated the parts she thought Marin might not follow, which turned out to be accurate more often than not. When Marin finally walked back out to her car, the gravel lot was quiet and the afternoon light was going gold across the dented door and the lopsided gutters and the sign that still said "by appointment preferred." She sat in her car for a moment without starting it. She thought about the note she had written on her clipboard 6 weeks ago, "Hobby metal. Sentimental value likely exceeds market." She had been wrong about the first part. Right about the second, she had just measured the sentiment on the wrong scale. She started the car and pulled out of the lot, and in the rearview mirror she watched the garage door stay open, the light inside warm and steady, a man and his daughter already back at work on something that didn't yet know what it would become. That was the thing about Cal Pruitt, she thought, as she turned onto the county road and headed back toward the highway. He always knew. He just didn't need anyone else to.